Well, what was the top political story of 2015? I think it'd be hard to argue with the fact of Justin Trudeau's election win taking that top spot. But let's check in with my friend and longtime journalist, political watcher, and gadfly, Ray Hurd. Ray, I may not be happy with Justin Trudeau's win, but it's hard to argue that going from third place to the Prime Minister's office is anything short of remarkable.
Yes, but I think you have to understand there's an old law of Canadian politics. I've covered every prime minister since Diefenbaker. Governments defeat themselves. Harper defeated himself, and then Mulcair came up beautifully and was ahead, and then Mulcair went berserk with the Quebec hijab issue, which killed him. So Justin Trudeau won by default. If Stephen Harper, and I was concerned about this because Harper's own top associates, I have one who was very senior, who was very upset. Harper should have listened to them. Firstly, he should have shown a more human face on the refugee issue and other issues. He is a very intelligent person. He is a very caring father, but he should have shown Canadians that side of his character. He didn't do that. He appeared to be mean-spirited. And the other issue was, if the assassinations and terrorism in Paris and California had occurred several months or several weeks earlier, Harper might have won on the issue of national security, but he didn't. So he was his own worst enemy.
Look, I'm not sure. I think there's a multitude of factors. I agree governments often defeat themselves. I think that you look at the collapse of the NDP vote in the 2015 federal election, and all of them saying, to heck with our principle, let's get behind Justin just to get rid of Harper. You look at the union third-party spending. All of this, it adds up over time. Almost all of the third-party groups that registered to spend money during the election and the ones that were spending before the election were all against Harper. There was a lot of outside money in there. So there were a lot of factors going in. Let me ask you, it's not even 2 months that Justin Trudeau's been in power. How do you rate his performance? And let's sit back and do this objectively, because I don't think that you're a big fan of Justin Trudeau. I'm definitely not. But how's he done so far? In my view, he's already broken several promises. And on the communication side, he's running in all directions, doing a town hall while cabinet ministers speak and other people do Twitter chats with the public. He's trying to talk a lot. I'm not sure he's saying a lot.
Well, he's reaching Canadians. I'm a bit surprised at how well he's done, because unlike Stephen Harper and Chrétien and Martin, Justin Trudeau showed up in Toronto the other day at a Christmas party in a shopping center for CTV, handing out presents to kids. He flew all the way from Ottawa to Toronto, and CTV local news here has huge numbers.
It is the most watched newscast in Canada. Forget the national. CTV Toronto, most watched newscast in the country.
And they have the best anchor, Ken Shaw. But the real issue is Justin is not going to be a prime minister who stays in Ottawa all the time. When Canadians think of the prime minister, subconsciously they think of Ottawa, even though you live there. It's one of the most boring cities on earth.
Oh, God.
Okay, so Justin has made a conscious decision, and he's well orchestrated by his puppeteer, Gerald Butts, who actually should be called the co-prime minister of Canada, with Kathleen Wynne, the third member of the three prime ministers we have now. But Justin will be out across the country meeting, quote, ordinary, unquote, Canadians, meeting children. He took a bunch of kids from the Ottawa hospital to see a preview of Star Wars the other day. And these kids, some of them were very badly ill, or are very badly ill. These kids were sworn to secrecy about the plot of the latest Star Wars movie. Now, no other prime minister has done things like that. And you can say they're cheap tricks, They're stunts. But to ordinary Canadians, they see their Prime Minister, who's young and is a father of very attractive kids, they see the Prime Minister in a new light. So I give him credit for that. It won't last. I've been involved in the refugee crisis because a very close friend of mine from Calgary has donated apartments for up to 1,000 refugees, and I've been in the loop on this. On the refugee thing, they've broken their promise, which is to bring in 25,000 by the first.
But I think, look, I give them credit on that. I think their supporters cut them slack on that, because the simple fact is, logistically, security-wise, health screening-wise, you couldn't bring in 25,000 people that quickly.
Yes, I agree, and I'm glad that John McCallum listens to people who told him very early, you can't do it in this time. But here's the sad thing about this, Brian. The government of Canada has broken its promise, and most Canadians applaud, to bring in 25,000 by January 1st. But it says it's keeping the dumbest promise any government has made, that is to withdraw our aircraft from the mission against ISIS led by Obama. And Obama's not a Bush, he's a progressive. Now, do you know why this is so bad? Because the Obama airstrikes right now are succeeding by cutting ISIS off from the oil fields, which give it the money to get weapons to fight the war. And Justin has time to change his mind. If Justin is smart, he will say, we're leaving those planes there for at least another 4 months. And Obama will be so grateful.
Unfortunately, I don't think he will. Those airstrikes, by the way, have also helped the Kurds take back ground they lost. And that is vitally important. You can say you'll do all the training you want. If it gives the Kurds cover to do the work on the ground, that's worth it. It was funny to watch, at the same time as they're saying, well, we're bringing our planes back because we're only 2% of the sorties, only 2% of the bombing missions. They were in Paris saying, well, we've got to do this on climate change. Well, we're only 2% of the global emissions, Ray. So why do we have to do anything?
Brian,
why don't we just do nothing?
Even the socialists on the Toronto Star agree the climate change deal is the biggest ripoff probably in non-war diplomatic history because it's non-binding on anyone. All they promised to do, and Canada, by the way, had more delegates there than the United States or the United Kingdom.
Or Australia combined.
Yeah. Okay, so Canada goes there. We have a minister whose husband works for Maclean's magazine, which is kind of a conflict for him. What we have is a scam. It is non-binding. And you know why it's non-binding? Because the American Congress would not approve of a deal like this, which gave power to another organization.
Ray,
so
but that is the way it should be, Ray. I would not accept a binding agreement. Who's going to enforce an agreement between Canada and Saudi Arabia, in Zimbabwe, in Pakistan, and North Korea? Who's going to enforce that? Who has the authority to reign over every sovereign nation on earth? No organization has that, and that's the way it should be.
They do. The bureaucrats at the United Nations do. And Justin, by the way, is committed. But Brian, as the year was ending, or is ending, there's another huge scandal, and this is possibly the most serious. 2 top aides to Dalton McGuinty have been charged with criminal offenses for destroying evidence in the gas plant scandal, which confirms Ontario is the most corrupt regime in Canadian history. Quebec, they allow bikers and mobsters to do bad things. In Ontario, the bad guys are at Queen's Park. And this story will continue next year. And I'd like to ask this question, Brian. The 2 top aides to McGuinty.
Well, hold on, Ray. Hold on.
Okay.
I've heard people say, stop calling them aides, and I kind of agree with that because we're talking about David Livingston,
Yes.
who was the
Chief of
chief
Staff.
of staff, and Laura Millett, the deputy chief of staff. I mean, it's not some flunky that carries the bags. These are the two top people in his office. They're the ones facing charges on fraud.
Yeah, and I call them on Twitter the top aides. But here's the very interesting political philosophical question. The Nuremberg Principle, when World War II ended, established a rule in international law, and it should be national law. The people who execute the orders of the leader, in this case, the chief of staff and the deputy chief of staff, were they doing it on their own? Or did Dalton McGuinty know they were doing it? And if he didn't know, why didn't he know? And we're not talking about a couple of $100 million now. We're talking about well over $1 billion of taxpayers' money being wasted to win one or two provincial seats. And I suggested on Twitter today, and I got a lot of response, I think the RCMP and the Ontario Provincial Police will have to open a special branch at Queen's Park to keep track of the Liberals. But it is very serious. Kathleen Wynne is saying she had nothing to do with it. Well, she was a member of the cabinet.
She was, beyond that, Ray, she was chair of the cabinet committee that signed off on this. And what those two, Livingston and Miller, are facing charges over is the deletion of information, including having, they didn't just delete documents or shred documents, they had hard drives wiped clean. They went after, people went after backup tapes of hard drives to make sure that we could not find out what happened. You're right, this will continue into 2016. I want to touch on another provincial story though, Ray, and it has nothing to do with Ontario. That is the disaster that is becoming Alberta. Everything from hiking the price of carbon on oil, bringing in new regulations, higher corporate tax rates, a bill to stop farm kids from helping out their parents on the family farm, the Notley government, disaster from beginning to end. This reminds me so much of Ontario in 1990. They elected Bob Rae government thinking, a lot of people thinking they're just going to do a protest vote because they were upset with the arrogance of the other guys, and they didn't realize what they'd done. I think that's what happened in Alberta.
Alberta is worse. Alberta's worse. Ontario's had a pretty long progressive tradition. Alberta had been run by the Tories for like 2 generations. Before that, social credit. Notley won because Prentice, who became briefly the premier, cocked things up. But the real reason that the socialists got control of the Texas of Canada, which is Alberta, the real reason this happened was the Wild Rose Party, headed by someone I kind of liked, Daniel Smith, suddenly decided to join the Tories, and 8 or 9 of them defected to join Prentice, and the voters were furious. If the Wild Rose Party had not broken up, if Daniel Smith had been true to her origins, guess who would be premier today?
Danielle Smith.
Danielle Smith. So it shows history often doesn't work according to rules. It works in its own funny ways. And Canada today has one of the most radical socialist governments in the Western world. And if you look overseas, even to Latin America today, you'll see left-wing socialist regimes, and this is in Europe too, seem to be losing ground. In Canada, they're gaining ground. And that ends by one conclusion. The most successful Canadian politician this year was the Premier of Quebec, Couillard. He tackled the deficit and the debt. He has been a very good premier. He has survived, but he has succeeded. And he's taken steps in Quebec opposite to Kathleen Wynne and Justin Trudeau.
And
Wynne
Rachel
and Trudeau want to tax and spend their way out of the recession. Couillard has got control of things. He's smart. He happens to be a brain surgeon. I think Kathleen Wynne looks to me as though she needs brain surgery. So maybe he can do a quick operation to get some brain into her head.
Ray, we'll leave it there. Thanks for
Okay.
joining us all through 2015. I'm sure we'll chat again next year. Happy New Year to you.
Same to you.